Thanks for joining us here on the Australian Baseball Players Alumni. Brad Harmon, Justin Huber and Michael Nakamura. You guys have had an interesting career, of course, all coming from the Upwey Baseball Club. All three of you made it to the Major League level. Just interested in what actually got you involved in baseball in the first place. It's not a huge sport here in Australia, but somehow you guys got involved in baseball. How did that come about?
For me, it was purely my dad was involved in the game, so ever since I could walk, I was walking at the baseball field, and then obviously picked up a ball, started playing and enjoyed it, became pretty good at it, and off I went from there.
I was a little different. My dad's from Switzerland, so he had absolutely no background in the sport. My mum was from up in New South Wales and grew up with rugby and netball and stuff, so she had no background in the sport. We just happened to be walking through Knox City Shopping Centre as a 6-year-old, and with mum and dad, and a local member from Upwey Baseball Club was handing out flyers to the T-ball program, which at the time was really booming, which we didn't know at the time. It was just, you know, up and coming sport, bat and ball sport. Mum and dad thought, oh yeah, give him a try at something completely different. And I got in as a T-baller at Upwey and just absolutely fell in love with the sport. So I was pretty lucky.
Yeah, I was a little bit different, I guess, too. Actually, mum and dad were out furniture shopping, and as you know, if you're a kid, it's the worst thing ever. And dad said, if you just be quiet, I'll buy you something. So I shut up, and after we finished shopping around furniture, dad bought 2 gloves, and then from there it just started.
Obviously your careers came along fairly quickly. When did the first sort of state Victorian teams come about? And of course national teams, I'm sure, would have followed from there. But where was your first experience at Victorian level?
For myself, it was, I represented, I guess, Victoria, that went under the banner of the Aussies, and we travelled over to Japan in under 12s. But with the national championships, it was under 14. So I was 12 years of age, represented the green side, and then the blue side in my top age under 14s. So yeah, 12 or 13 years of age was about my first time, and was lucky enough to represent Victoria 4 or 5 times throughout my junior career.
1994, Upwey took a under 12, first time the club had ever taken a team over to the US on a bit of a fun sort of trip series. They lined up some games in St. Louis. We went through Hawaii on the way there. And they organised that. Rob Sadler and David Rice put that trip together. So we went away as an under-12 team, and that was really, I think, probably what ignited my career. Certainly the love for the sport, because I got a taste of what life was like outside of Australian shores, and I saw what baseball was like outside of Australian shores. So that probably ignited the start of my career. And following on from that, I was lucky enough to represent Victoria as a junior 5 times, finishing off in under-18s where the Victorian team actually won the national championships, which was still to this day, with all that's happened in my career, still one of my fondest memories, winning a national championship for the Big V. So yeah, that was my sort of starting out in the sport anyway.
Yeah, I was around 12. First state team. I'm about 10 years older than these 2 guys here, so it was a lot different. The system then, under 12, under 14, there was no real state tournament. It was more of a Melbourne-Sydney exchange. We went up there, we played a Cubs and Colts tournament over a weekend and came back, and then I think under 16s is when the actual state championship started, where there was actually outside of New South Wales and Victoria. So yeah, it was a little bit different times.
As junior players at Upwey Ferntree Gully, who had real influences on you coaching wise that sort of set you on a path to some good skills, obviously, with your baseball careers? Who got you started?
For me, my era was Ted Whale. Ted Whale was a huge influence at the club. David Prentice, David Rice. And later on, guys like John Wadsworth, John Galloway, Matty Sheldon Collins, these guys were huge club members, and the Snoxels, and I could go on and on. There's so many great coaches at Upwey at the time. They were really, really instrumental in putting together really, really great programs, right the way from T-ball right up until the seniors. That was something that Upwey really boasted, sung from the rooftops about how great the coaching was at Upwey at the time. So I owe so much to those coaches at the early parts of my career and my journey, for sure.
Yeah, with Upwey, the coaching staff, like everybody that Justin just mentioned, they'd already had 10 years or plus experience by the time these two had come along. And I think that was the key contributor to the whole success of Upwey. Volunteers putting in a lot of time, a lot of experience. By the time, and it produced, I don't know, maybe a dozen professional baseball players.
The club just was at a whole different place in its cycle. They had a committee. John Williams really pushed T-ball as a fundamental bedrock of the club. They were really instrumental in making sure that T-ball was both free and accessible to everybody that lived in the close proximity, and they marketed out. They spent a lot of time in schools, and really those guys, they had a 20-year vision for the club, which if you talk to some of the old soldiers around, they'll tell you, they sat down with Waverley Baseball Club, they sat down with Cheltenham, they found out, hey, what's making you a really long, successful club with longevity, and it was their T-ball program. So they set out on a 20-year vision that all of them stayed through and saw it all the way through to the end, which was absolutely remarkable considering, we were T-ballers, at a club, 400 T-ballers, and you're seeing those same players come through and actually be standouts on your Division 1 premiership team. So that's something that I don't think is we should ever sort of forget about in Upwey's heyday. Just how much effort went into setting up the bedrock. It was something that I haven't seen as much effort in those early days. It's really very unique.
Yeah, and I probably caught the back end, I guess, of working through that era, sort of coming through a little bit later on than these guys, but obviously going all the way through T-ball where there were kids everywhere, and then working my way through the juniors up through the senior ranks, and having, for me, all those guys were still around that Justin mentioned before, but probably Matty Sheldon Collins for me was one that sort of brought me along. He obviously did everything I wanted to do. He played for Australia, played in the Olympic Games, all these sorts of things, and he was very tough, but sort of got a lot of really good stuff out of me and really helped sort of myself in my career.
It was a great era, and Michael, you touched on the other pros that have also come out of the Upwey Ferntree Gully Baseball Club system. Besides you three guys, who else actually signed pro contracts out of Upwey?
You have Hogan, Bright, Kimberley, the two Uddings. Can you guys think of anybody else?
Mitch Ayres.
Yep.
Tremendous era. Not a lot of clubs can boast actually having that many guys sign pro contracts. Do you remember the first time a scout actually paid any attention to you, and the little spring in your step that might have come about that night? Who was it, and what other interest came from scouts during that junior era?
So for me, I guess it's sort of the belief that when guys end up signing pro contracts, they're sort of in talks with clubs leading into their last year of nationals, that final year of under-18s. For me, I'd had one or two of those little tracker cards type things that happened the previous year, but apart from that, that was it. And then as soon as the last year of under-18 championships finished, I hadn't heard anything, and so I thought that was sort of it for me, and I was going to have to try and pursue the college route or look at trying to go to school in America to keep playing baseball. Fortunately, it was about 6 weeks after the tournament, early March, when the Phillies' Kevin Hooker got in touch with myself, and basically it all happened really quickly from that first phone call. It was 3 days later, and I'd signed a contract with the Phillies, and there it was, off I went.
Justin, in your case?
Yeah, for me, it was John Viney. John Viney was a scout for the Brewers at the time, and being an ex-catcher, and him and Charlie Wallner took a very keen interest in my catching career, coming through the Cubs and Colts program with the then Victorian Baseball Association. So yeah, John was really instrumental in my career and sparked some interest from a professional scouting level. But he wasn't the one that signed me. James Waddell was scouting for the New York Mets, and what every player finds, and there's rare players that every scout wants to sign them, but what most players find is that they end up with one really big sponsor. Like one sponsor really sees something in them that is an unpolished diamond that they want to put into their system and cultivate. So for me, that was James Waddell. He threw all his eggs into one basket and sent me on my way to the New York Mets as a fresh-faced 18-year-old in 2001. So he was my big sponsor, and I don't really remember being. Well, I definitely remember being excited initially by the prospect that scouts might be looking, but I never really remember being totally absorbed by their eyes or completely focused on trying to impress them. As a player, I was always far more into trying to do whatever I could to help the team win the game, and I was really just into what I was doing out on the field. I really wasn't worried about playing for their sake. And I think that's probably was a big thing for players. Now that I'm finding I'm coaching a lot of players, it's something I sort of try to tell them, because the pressure of those eyes, those professional eyes on you all the time, can cripple the young player. But I certainly try to let them know that it's worry about your teammates first, and all the rest will take care of itself on the field.
Yeah, I think around my time is like the beginning of the height of scout mania, I'd call it. Everybody was a scout. Everybody was bird dogging for a scout. It was like kind of like everywhere you'd go, everywhere there was a scout. And I remember my under 18 state team, I would almost say over half would have signed from that tournament. And I remember I had interest coming, like I was filling out cards at the age of 15, 16, and I think everybody would sign cards at that point, you know. And I think I had a developing point at 15, 16 where I suddenly started playing in the Aces, you know, equivalent to the Aces, which was the Reds, back at Waverley Park. And I was 16 when I made that team, and you know, basically I was an everyday weekend player, you know, coming out of the bullpen, and interest was there. But if you took a look at me, performance were good, right-hand pitcher, 5'11", they're everywhere, you know. So it was kind of like I knew I had to have a backup plan. So I kind of sat down, looked at the big perspective, because I knew I wanted to sign professionally. That was a dream. No, that was it. And I said, whatever I have to do, I'm going to pursue that dream. And I sat down in year 12, pulled out of the under-19 Australian team. I made it the year before, so pretty much the second year you get to walk on. I focused on my studies. I took my SATs. So then I had the option. I could go to a Division I university on a full scholarship, and if Pro Ball didn't work out, then at least I'm coming away with an education. I had to do this because I did a lot of research, and my dad was kind of cluey, and we looked at it that way. And then I went to university for 3 years. Came back, and I was undrafted as a junior out of university, and I said to my father, I said, look, give me 6 months. If I don't sign, I'll finish my university course, and I'll move on from there. And I went overseas to Japan. I did a tryout, and at this time, like towards the end of my training, I gained a lot of velocity, and I was offered a professional contract in Japan, but they wanted to draft me, so I would have had to wait a year. And when I came home, I started pitching at club ball, and John Wadsworth was there, and at that time he was with the Diamondbacks. And I think I lit up his gun a little bit, and he got excited, and then I just happened to go out to an Aces game or a Reds game, Monarchs game at that time at Moorabbin now. And I saw Howie Norsetter, and I said, I was throwing 94 the other weekend. And he's like, well, if you throw 94 for me, you're signing. I'll sign you. And he came out that following weekend. I was 94. The next 3 weekends I was 94, and I decided I'd go with the Twins, and that's where my career started.
When you look back on the attention and the signing of contracts and all of that sort of goes with being a pro athlete, do you think it's good for the young kids getting all that attention? Do you think it affects them at all in their performance or in their training or at all? Do you think it does affect the young kids?
I think it's an individual basis, depending on the kid really. But I mean, look, for me, it didn't affect me in any way. I didn't sign for big dollars or anything. But at the end of the day, you're signing bonus and all that attention. You head over to spring training and you realise that you're a very small guy in a very big locker room. So, you know, and those guys that sometimes do take that philosophy over, that they've signed for big money, or you know, they're touted as the best thing to come out of the country. Once you get to spring training, you get a really quick reality check. So whether you like it or not, you know, it's time to put the hard work in, because signing bonuses don't get you to the big leagues or get you to low A. So look, it's an individual basis, but I think once you get over there, it sort of gets wiped away pretty clean, and everyone's on a level playing field.
Yep. When you guys first did sign your pro contracts and you headed over to the States for the first time, I'm sure you again had a little spring in your step and were really keen to be involved in it. Yes, it's a big fish in a little fish in a big pond setup, but who really influenced you when you started playing in those early pro years to make you want to continue on and make it to the big leagues?
I think for me it was just the drive. I think signing a pro contract is definitely a goal and a dream, but there's one ultimate goal and one ultimate dream. So it wasn't so much looking for inspiration from others, it was just knowing that I wanted to get better and progress, and I wanted to play in the big leagues. So there's not too much room to look around. Every time you go out on the field, there's, for me, 4 middle infielders, and I just knew that I had to be better than them and work harder than them to get to the next level. Then you start again, and there's 4 more guys. So probably not so much, looking around for any inspiration or extra motivation. You want to get to that top goal. It's a long way away. You just know you keep working.
Yeah, I think it's the system, really. I mean, nothing really prepares you for the system. You know, one thing, talking to people back in Australia, when you try to explain how many minor league teams there are and how the big league process works, and you know, how many teams you've got to play in before you even around the mark, it staggers people. You know, when you tell people, oh, you know, St Kilda, they got a reserve team, but imagine if St Kilda had 6 reserve teams, and you got to pretty much be the best player on each of those teams at your position to move up a level. That sort of gives you a rough sketch of what's ahead of you, and probably I say probably one of the hardest things about moving through is just consistency. You can't just have 1 or 2 good years and expect to be in the big leagues. You got to play consistently well through the minor leagues, day in, day out. 144 games a year in the minor leagues, 162 games a year in the big leagues, another 30 in spring training. You know, if you're playing four ball, or you come back and play in an off-season league, you know, you're racking up the games up around 200 games a year, and people just aren't prepared for that kind of workload, and I certainly wasn't. We all came out of playing, you know, 20 games a year, Division 1 baseball in Melbourne. You know, 20 more in the winter league. Nothing really ever prepares you for getting to spring training with 200 blokes in the locker room, and you're at the very bottom of the totem pole going, how the hell am I going to get from here all the way up there? And nothing really prepares you for that. But look, once you get over that hump and you sort of start to realise the system and start to target things in your own game that you've got to improve, and start to look, you know, you're not looking so far ahead all the time. It's just little incremental, and coaches are there to help. They were awesome to me as a young player. They just really wanted to see that Aussie kid progress through the minor leagues, because it's a bit of a novelty for them as well. They don't see Australians come through the system all that often, so they want to see you make it as well. But yeah, I definitely. It's a big obstacle getting over that first leap of faith off the plane and seeing how many people you got to hurdle over to get to the big leagues.
Yeah, I didn't really have a person that I looked up to when I got there. It was kind of like when I was lucky with the Twins organisation, how we had a few players already signed with the Twins. So automatically we kind of grouped together. And then it was kind of like we got together, we helped each other out, but then at the same sense, we're sitting there competing for the same job, the same spot in the big leagues. And it's an awkward feeling. It's kind of like you're wishing your buddy success, but then when they don't succeed, it's good for you. And that's pro ball. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and it's sink or swim, to be absolutely honest. It's consistency, and it's learning how to separate yourself from other people, and you have to play the game within the game, I think. There's two games.